Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this year's MLK Day Assembly. This MLK Day celebration is a special one because this year Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would have been 90 years old, and today we can still celebrate and appreciate Dr. King's message and impact on American society. Dr. King's life work was to bring peace to the broken world he lived and breathed in. He made leaps and bounds to impart his belief and knowledge through powerful speeches, insightful prayer, and peaceful protests. Just like each one of us here, he was human, and while no one can be perfect at all times, we must strive, like Dr. King, to not live in complacency and stand up to injustice. To truly honor Dr. King's dream, today we must celebrate and acknowledge the diversity in our lives and come to appreciate it as a blessing. Please help us in our celebration.
Hi, I can't tell you how much of an honor this is for me, for Jamaria and Kem and Genza to ask me to talk about what Dr. King means to me. Thank you so much. I was born just outside of Washington, D.C., a few months after Dr. King was assassinated in Memphis. My father was from D.C., and he's buried at Arlington. So I go to visit as frequently as possible. Our nation's capital, the place where I was born, really is one of my favorite places in the whole world. Just over the river from Arlington is the Lincoln Memorial, and I always go there. The wall is a few steps from the Lincoln Memorial, Vietnam Memorial, the White House, the Washington Monument. On the other side of the mall is the Museum of African American History and Culture, the Air and Space Museum, the Capitol. I don't know how many of these sites the group that just went down last week got to see. I look forward to hearing about their trip. But a fairly new monument, opened only about 7 years ago, is for Dr. King. Every time I go there, I read some of the inscriptions, I think about his words, I think about his life. I'd like to share 3 of the quotations with you. First, in Los Angeles, he said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." And I think about the history of the United States, things that were great and things that were not so much. There's been a lot of bigotry and injustice, a lot of things that ended up actually leading to the marches from Selma to Montgomery that Dr. King took part in. These took place so that African Americans could register to vote. I mean, think about that. There's a combination of feelings that I get. There's inspiration, certainly, but more than a hint of sadness. Second quote from Dr. King that he gave in Norway when he received the Nobel Peace Prize. He was the youngest person to ever receive that. He said, "I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits." Dr. King's work, unfortunately, is not quite finished yet. I hope we all share in his dream, but there's things that need to be done still. My challenge to you as students of Portsmouth Abbey, as citizens of this 21st century world, is to follow Dr. King's example as best as you can. I hope that you're still all working on your New Year's resolution, including my suggestion to you a few weeks ago to be nicer. Don't give up, even if you haven't been perfect so far. Stand up for what is right, not in a violent way, but don't be afraid to speak out when you see people acting in ways that they shouldn't. You know, Dr. King was a reverend, he followed Christ, he followed Gandhi, he followed some of the great Americans who also have memorials on the National Mall, like Jefferson and Lincoln. Finally, the third quotation from the Martin Luther King memorial that I'd like to read for you is something that I hope that we can all do. "Make a career of humanity. Commit yourself to the noble struggle for equal rights. You will make a greater person of yourself, a greater nation of your country, and a finer world to live in."
He believed that a person's worth should not be measured by his or her color, culture, or class, but rather by his or her commitment to making a better life for all. He said, "We must work increasingly to uplift this nation that we love, to a higher destiny, to a higher plateau, to a more noble expression of humaneness. As he once said, Everybody can be great because everybody can serve. During his lifetime, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sought to forge the common ground on which people from all walks of life could join together as equals to address important community issues. This was driven by his commitment to enduring principles and a set of values that he lived his life according to. Some of these are courage. Dr. King believed that if you had nothing you were willing to die for, you had nothing you were living for. Nonviolence. Even when attacked by police dogs, police clubs, and water hoses, Dr. King and his followers refused to retaliate with physical violence.
Soul force, the power of a person's love and humanity to awaken other people's consciences. Justice. Dr. King said he wanted to be remembered as a drum major for justice. In spite of his nonviolence and soul force, he considered that an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere, and had to be confronted.
Community. Dr. King believed that all people are brothers and sisters. He believed that oppression of any part of the human family hurts the whole human family. He envisioned a day when people of all colors, nations, and religions could sit down at the table of brotherhood. He called his ideal the beloved community, and it included every human being. Love. Even the enemy is a neighbor who must be loved into doing right, for the enemy's sake as well as for the sakes of his or her victims.
Suffering and sacrifice. Those who would stand up for justice must be willing to endure much for the sake of their cause. Human dignity. All people deserve to be treated with equality and respect, simply because they are human beings.
Business. The victim must forgive the victimizer and make room for repentance and brotherhood. Faith. Eventually right will prevail because the universe is founded upon justice.
In honor of the late great Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King was a prominent leader in the civil rights movement. He fought for the equal rights of African Americans throughout this nation during the time when we were denied basic constitutional rights. Martin Luther King Jr. led the Montgomery bus boycott, became president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, helped organize the March on Washington where he delivered the famous I Have a Dream speech. And this is why I'm able to stand before you today. In 1963, he spoke of a country where little black boys and girls could hold hands with little white boys and girls. He spoke of a place where one would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. A place where our nation will live to the very message written by our founding fathers in 1787. But Mr. King also spoke of whirlwinds of revolt, continuing to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. We have come a great way since the civil rights movement, but we still have ways to go. The reality is, social injustices are very alive and present in today's society. Social injustices aren't just limited to racial discrimination, but can range from religion to gender to even sexual orientation. Going to the store with friends and being followed around by clerks because of the color of my skin is my reality. Not knowing whether to ask if I should go to a friend's house and fear that I will be denied because of the color of my skin is my reality. Living in a country where those of my color make up less than 10% of the population, but are 23% of the people killed by police since 2015 is my reality. Throughout life, we may all encounter social injustices, some more serious than others, some more often than others. But it's our duty as humans to not remain ignorant to it. We must stand up in the knowledge of justice, no matter how small or large, no matter if it's here at school or at home, no matter if the oppressor is your friend or colleague, until we reach the nation of equality that Dr. King spoke of. Thank you.
Yesterday at Mass, we hear Isaiah say, "For Zion's sake, I will not be silent. For Jerusalem's sake, I will not be quiet." I thought of these words in light of what we are doing today and what we have gone through as a community in the last few weeks. Our various identities, however distinct, however immutable, however indelible, can't be put before the simple but profound truth. We are, all of us, made in the image and likeness of God. For Zion's sake today, I will not be silent. Our intersectional tribalism, if fostered over and against our common humanity, will ruin our community. Dr. Martin Luther King, or more to my point today, the Reverend King, deeply understood our shared human nature and our inner conflicts. Like the prophets of old, those pesky men and women who tell the tribe the stark, naked truth, even if it was considered uncool or rude. The prophets refused to remain polite and tell the tribe that everything was all good. No, Martin Luther King refused to swallow the truth. He chose to speak up. For our own Jerusalem, the United States, he refused to remain silent. It is my sincere hope that today is not just an exercise to check the box. Today is no mere history lesson. I'm humbled to be a citizen of the United States, and fortunate. But my gratitude doesn't extend to telling lies, or accepting lies, or pretending. The work of our experiment is always in front of us. I believe that we live within the greatest political experiment ever, but an experiment it is. Our legacy of race-based slavery nearly destroyed our country before it could even get off the ground. But the strain of the obvious injustice of institutional slavery proved too great. How can you square the soaring ideals expressed in the Declaration and Constitution with the reality of slavery? The Civil War was incomparably bloody and mortal, but the stains of slavery were replaced with the twisted and cruel realities of Jim Crow. In many respects, the Jim Crow South was every bit as brutal. I grew up in the aftermath of that disconnect in Louisiana. The legacy of racism remains stubborn and profound. Don't let the black and white civil rights era photos fool you. It was all too real and all too recent. We hold these truths to be self-evident, booms the Declaration, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's easy to forget. It's easy to forget what's important. And when we forget, we descend into our worst angels. How do we remember? How do we become our better angels? How do we remember when we often don't want to remember? That was the past, we might say. It's so much better now, we might say. After all, we live in the moment, live and let live and all that. But the good Reverend decided it was time. We had for too long ignored the disconnect between reality and our ideals. Reverend King, prophet-like, reminds us still of what we say we stand for. For Zion, for Jerusalem, Reverend King would not remain silent. He famously tells us, when the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note. He goes on, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We take time to remember today because when left to our own devices, we forget. Our own community, the one we live in and love, is also prone to forget. We are always pulled by our tribal realities to forget the bigger and better truth. We are equal in dignity. We have a shared humanity. Reverend King's message is as important today as it was then. Let us look into ourselves today and into the dark recesses of our own hearts. Let us work towards building a new Jerusalem here. For Zion's, for Jerusalem's sake, we cannot remain silent.